Well, then in 2020, you were officially released from prison.
Yes.
By that time, how many years had you served?
45.
45 years. So you essentially spent twice as much time in prison than you spent outside.
Yes. You know, I stepped away from the brand in 84, so I spent an additional 35 years in prison after stepping away from the brand. You know, this wasn't a 30 pieces of silver situation, or I was in trouble, so I was testifying to get out of trouble or to save myself. It wasn't any of that, and that's why I spent an additional 35 years in prison.
Mm-hmm. I mean, did you expect to get out a little earlier considering the cooperation?
No, my cooperation was never considered by the board. I wouldn't allow it.
Really? Why is that?
Because that's not why I cooperated. You know, I wasn't interested in receiving anything. My thinking was that I either do what I'm going to do because I believe it's the right thing to do, or I'm not going to do it. Now, there were decisions I made in the RICO prosecutions where I declined. I told them no. You know, and that's my prerogative. So I elected not to be involved in some cases. But in other cases, I did elect to be involved. Margot Compton was the killing of 2 girls. Curtis Price was the killing of Steve's father. There are those who say, well, you're in for a penny, in for a pound. I don't believe that. You know, the discretion and the decision is mine and remains mine. So that upset a lot of people within law enforcement. And so, you know, I got a lot of pushback from law enforcement, a lot of setups, attempts on my life as a result of law enforcement setting me up. So, I mean, that comes with the territory when you make a decision like I made. They want what they want for the reasons that they want it.
Well, what was it like? You know, you went in 74?
Yes.
And you come out in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to say the world is different is an understatement, is a massive understatement.
It is.
When you came in, I mean, there were no cell phones, there was no internet, there were no electric cars. There's just too many differences to name.
Yes.
It's just a completely different planet that you're now stepping into.
We are in agreement. Yeah.
What was the hardest adjustment in the beginning?
It remains the hardest adjustment, and that's sensory overload. What they call post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And I didn't think that I would fall victim to that, but I certainly did. They dropped me off in the middle of East LA. And that was an experience. You want to remember when I went to prison, I came from the mountains. Remember I talked about the idea of taking my own life because I couldn't live in a cage. Well, I lived in that cage for 45 years. So that's a controlled environment. Then I come out of that cage into East LA. You know, in the first week that I was there, 3 cats around the corner were capped in the head. One was stabbed to death out in front of the place I was staying. I thought, this isn't much different. So, but yeah, to answer your question, sensory overload, there are a lot of things. I mean, I was not computer literate. So the learning curves are astronomical. I was fortunate enough to educate myself while in prison. When I came to prison, I couldn't read or write. But while in prison, I learned to read and write and then educated myself. And nonetheless, the learning curve was enormous and remains enormous. I live in an area right now that is fairly isolated, not a lot of people, and I can practice my way of life. If I remain a native and I continue to follow that way and practice that way. So that helps me immensely. But I also work as an AOD counselor and a life coach. But, that requires internet access, and right now I'm forbidden internet access. Working on that. It's a matter of just working and moving forward. and hopefully evolving in my humanity.